Hello, welcome to the DevRel Survival Guide. In this episode, we are going to look at how AI tools can help you in your DevRel practice. My name is Matthew Ravel, and I've been speaking to DevRel practitioners and also people who make AI tools to see what they can do and maybe even if they're a threat to us as DevRel practitioners. Before we get into this episode, I want to thank Common Room for sponsoring. You can head to commonroom.io to learn more about the platform that brings together your CRM, product and community data and is used by some of today's fastest growing companies. That's commonroom.io. Thanks for sponsoring. Let's clarify some terminology. There are lots of different types of AI, and what's been in the news lately are large language models, or LLMs. So let's look at what they are.
My name is Logan Kilpatrick. I lead developer relations at OpenAI, focused on helping support developers building with our API, as well as building ChatGPT plugins, which is our sort of emerging developer space. So the general take is that large language models is essentially a machine learning model that's been trained on a large corpus of text. And the whole intent of a large language model is just to predict the next word or the next token in a sequence. So you give it a sentence, and it's literally just trying to predict like what is the next sequence of characters that's most likely to come after this. And you throw in a little bit of randomness for the sort of outputs to be more broad in general. But that's the basic take, is lots of content that it's been trained on, and it's trying to predict the next piece of content that's coming after. This is, as an aside, this is really important to get a sense of like how the machine learning technology works, because you start to understand that like ChatGPT, for example, has no worldview. Like it doesn't have a lot of these constructs that we as humans have, because like it's truly just trying to do that one specific task. It can do it really, really well, which is why it's able to generate content that's, across all these different domains. But like fundamentally, it's like super constrained in the, if you want to think about it, like the logic of how it approaches solving a problem. Like it solves them all in the same way, using that same sort of next token prediction process.
So then, how have these AI tools been helping people with their DevRel work? Let's hear from 3 people who've been putting them to the test.
My name is Tessa Mero, and I'm head of developer relations at Appwrite. So I've recently asked different team members, including members from other teams, what kind of tools they're using and how we're using it. And I realize it's for a lot more areas than I thought. Specifically for our team, we're using it for content, mainly for social media and content. For presentations, we have support engineers on the team, so we're using it to help the support. It's helping us with evaluating analytics and market trends and data and research in that area. Our engineers are using it for debugging. I think that's like the main areas.
Yeah, my name is Matthew Groves, and I work for a company called Couchbase. It's a NoSQL database company. I've been there for 7 years. My main concern is helping developers and helping them to succeed and helping them learn about Couchbase. Right now, I'm very much focused on building an example application, trying to build as much as I can with the LLM tools that everyone is aware of. Seeing how they work, seeing where they excel, where they are not doing so well, and just trying to put together a story about how these tools can be effective in coding.
Colm Doyle, who heads up DevRel for Intercom.
Today we're pretty light about it. I think the biggest thing is like ChatGPT. Between ChatGPT and Copilot, like the speed at which you can create code samples has like gone through the roof. So it's like, whereas previously creating code samples, say Illustrator Point, would have taken, I don't know, like a couple of days, you know what I mean, to build like a decent kind of end-to-end code sample. Now it's like GPT and Copilot are writing a bunch of it, which means like when we have a new API endpoint or we want to support a new language, it's much easier for us to just kind of jam out a code sample. And because we have all the context of how our API works, we can kind of see when the LLM is screwing it up, you know what I mean? And we're like, oh, well, that doesn't make any sense. That's wrong. But it's a slight tweak. So you're more kind of editing existing code rather than generating it fresh. The company I work at, Intercom, has a support bot which is powered by various LLMs.
but we haven't turned it live on our docs. So we haven't turned it on yet as like a layer above our documentation, but like that's definitely interesting.
So what tools are Tessa, Matthew, and Colm using day to day?
Yeah, so I'm focused on 3 tools mainly at this point for coding, as ChatGPT, of course, both 3 and 4, GitHub Copilot Chat and Copilot in general, and then Google Bard. So I've looked at all 3 of those tools, and I spent time with them. I actually have a live coding stream on Twitch where I explore all those tools as I build this real-world example application. So I've tried all 3 of those, and I've got all kinds of interesting things I've learned about them along the way. The sort of the end goal with this project is to create a real-world example application that can help developers get up and running quickly with, in my case, ASP.NET and Couchbase, but we're exploring other ones as well, like Spring and Node and things like that. So that's just kind of the short-term goal, is to get those example projects available for helping developers. Of course, the long-term goal is for me to understand, or try to help understand, how effective these tools are in building applications. And the goal there is to come up with a plan or a roadmap to build future sample applications for other languages and platforms. We're a database company and we serve 10 to 12 different language communities. So using this to kind of help to learn if we can scale those example applications out to all those different communities instead of just focusing on one at a time. That's a goal here, is basically to help people write more code with Couchbase, right? And this might be a way to help them write more effective code or help us to write more effective example applications faster. I'm focused on building this application in a language and a platform that I know well, right? So if there is something that's generated by ChatGPT or Copilot that jumps out at me as wrong for security reasons or wrong for performance reasons, that's something I'm able to understand and address immediately, right? That's more challenging if I'm working in a language that I'm not familiar with. If I try to build something in Rust, for instance, I might have a hard time with that. So it's not that I'm building them completely with these applications, just copying and pasting exactly what they are generating, but I'm also using them to help understand what is being built and why it's being built. So that's something that these tools can also be used for. So people focus on the code generation a lot, and it's pretty cool, but it's also useful for reading code. And as developers, we spend a lot more time reading code than we do writing code. So this can be a very effective tool at understanding a legacy code base, for instance. Put in a function that's poorly named or badly documented and explain what this code does. Help me out so I can make changes to that code or write better tests.
For Tessa and the team at Appwrite, AI tools have made their way into almost every area of DevRel operations.
We use it for improving our email campaigns and evaluating data with that. Our operations team uses it for improving their emails being sent. You can use it for our travel itineraries, like we're going to a conference in 2 weeks. Can you help build out an itinerary? I think Google Bard can also do a lot of similar things as well. We also have a developer experience engineer on our team. He uses, and I had no idea he was using Notion AI. It helps you automatically finish sentences. It helps you format things, make it look nice. And the amount of content AI tools out there is just growing very quickly with, Copy AI for improving content. There's an AI tool called Genie. I was just reading about today that one of our team members uses and it specializes in summarization of text. Just interesting. I still haven't compared it to ChatGPT, but he says that it works better with that. Right now, we're experimenting with different video AI tools, and there's several of them popping up here and there. There's AI tools to create a slide deck for you. I wouldn't say that's the greatest technology yet. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. I feel like creating presentations is more of a creative process, especially in the DevRel side of things. I know there's AI image type of tools, but that's like a dangerous area to explore, especially with working for a company, as there's like no regulations around using certain tools. There's also an interesting tool I've been using as well called Jasper. And Jasper specializes in creating blog posts. But I'm still not a fan of exactly how these AI tools generate blog posts. Every time when I read someone else's blog posts, I start like identifying, yeah, that was written by AI. That was written by AI. I could have just taken the topic title and write this myself and then read it on ChatGPT rather than going to those blog sites and reading it there. So the kind of content I'm actually really valuing is listening to people's perspectives, hearing about their opinions. So if you're able to take AI generated content and spin in your opinion and also train it to speak like you, there's a lot of work you can do. So it takes a little time to get used to understanding what prompts to use when working with AI to be able to get the results that you're looking for.
It's clear to see that AI tools are already having an impact on how we do DevRel on a day-to-day basis. But what about the longer-term approach? How does Colm Doyle at Intercom see the next few years and maybe the changes that they need to make at their company to take AI tools into consideration?
Yeah, change our approach. God might be generous. I think, I guess what it is like my experience of building both the samples and like I had to build something recently internally. And I'd say, I don't even know what percentage of the code I actually wrote myself, but because it was like just a scrappy internal tool, it didn't really, it wasn't too heavy. But as I wrote those things, like all I was constantly thinking was like, right, if everyone's going to be writing these things like this, what do I need to change about my documentation approach in order to make it so that the likes of GitHub Copilot or ChatGPT can like easily ingest the content we're creating, right? So first of all, that means there needs to be a lot more text. I love video as a format. I think it accommodates, a really popular learning style, but it's kind of useless to bots, right? Unless you can feed it a transcript. But visual stuff is kind of useless to these bots, particularly the popular ones, is my understanding anyway. So it immediately puts more of an emphasis on like, right, we need to write tutorials. We need to be pretty direct in the tutorials. Like we need to explain things in quite plain language, which we should probably be doing anyway, if I'm honest. Like acronyms and stuff like that. It's bad practice anyway. And then more of the code samples, because obviously Copilot is trained on corpuses of public repos. So there's more of an emphasis away from video towards stuff that LLMs can consume, because like I said, if a lot of these apps are going to be written using Copilot or people consulting GPT-4, like I've never used as much I say I've used more regex in the last 3 months than I have in my entire career combined, because regex is terrible to learn and bots are really, really good at it. So it's that kind of thinking. It's like, and like I am constantly thinking like, how do we need to change our docs? And I don't know the answer, if I'm completely honest. And like, I really need to talk to the ML team at my current place to understand it better. But like, what do I need to adjust about our documentation to make it more LLM friendly? There's some really interesting, I wouldn't say problems, but like challenges to that. And the two big ones that stick out to me are, the first one is when you point one of these bots at a web page, right? You have to be relatively smart, because web pages are busy. They have lots of different things going on at any one time, right? So if you think of like the Guardian website or the Wall Street Journal or whatever, if you go to their website, right, you're going to have like a central pane of content. And then you're going to have like on the sidebar, you're probably going to have links to other articles or like a byline or something like that. And you're going to have like ads, and you're going to have all these different things going on. So like processing text is expensive for these LLMs. So they try to be smart. Some companies try to be smart about, right, what is the essence of this web page? So I'm only feeding the essence to it. And in the example I gave of like the Guardian, the Wall Street Journal, it's usually a safe bet that like the central piece of content contains the vast majority of what we need. So a lot of scrapers will take just that central piece of content and they'll discard the rest. And that works great to an extent for like Wall Street Journal or The Guardian. But that kind of completely falls apart with a lot of documentation websites, right? Because you've got the central pane, which is you've got the central pane, which is explaining the core concept. And then on the right, you might have code samples. On the left, you might have like version pickers or different languages and all this kind of stuff. And usually in docs, the whole viewport is kind of important. So if you slice out just the core central part, you're going to lose a bunch of context. The other one that folks have talked to me about is LLMs are just really bad with like versions. The way a lot of doc sites are structured, there's usually like a quick picker to pick between versions. And it's hard to explain the notion of API versions to a bot, right? So if you ask it how to do something, so like if it's Slack, it's like, get me, how do I get all the messages from a given channel, right? If there's multiple different versions of how to do that, the bot's not really going to know which one of those it should give you. So that's a bit of a challenge that I haven't quite figured out, if I'm honest. And that's part of why we haven't turned on the support bot on our own documentation, is because the existing technologies we've used have trouble with it, right? They do, not they have trouble, but they don't give us the results that we're comfortable with. So we wouldn't ship it to customers and therefore we won't use it ourselves. I don't know if I'd go as far as changing our versioning strategy to accommodate LLMs, but like, thought about it.
Clearly, these tools have their weaknesses. So what else should we be on the lookout for?
I guess one of the most obvious things is that some of these tools are limited to 2021 and earlier, as we're recording this anyway. And so sometimes it's generating code or patterns that's out of date because we're 2+ years past that at this point. So these tools are still learning, right? So they're still growing and learning more things as they get more input. So I find it to be helpful to be as specific as you can, right? If you wanting to use a specific SDK version, tell the chatbot that. Say, I want to use Couchbase SDK 3, because otherwise it might imply, based on the year that it has cut off, that you want to use the most popular SDK back then, which might be version 2 or 2.5 or whatever. So it helps to be very specific when you're talking to these tools and understanding that it may be giving you outdated information.
The promise of these AI tools is that they'll help us to be more effective, we'll get more done, or we'll save time. But if we need to babysit them and constantly check that they're not hallucinating or otherwise making mistakes, are they actually saving time?
Oh, it's 100% saving time. It's like you can focus your energy on the bits that are specific to your API, that are like your knowledge, right? So if you're writing a TypeScript sample, right, you could have a code sample that would have like switch statements and different control statements and all these kinds of things. And like I said earlier, regex, right? And you can use all these things to prove it, right? But like these are kind of like rote knowledge and they're common to all these kind of different platforms. And of course, like if you're an experienced developer, you don't think a lot about writing these things. But like with the likes of Copilots, like you literally don't have to think about them. You could just like start to type out or like type a comment to give it a prompt. Then you can just hit return until you get to the bit which is specific about the concept you're trying to demonstrate in your API or the programming concept you're trying to emphasize, which means you can focus in on that, right? And because you haven't had to think about all the other stuff, you're naturally saving time. Would you then spend the same amount of time maybe polishing and refining your code? Maybe, but in my experience, it's just like I said about refining the concept that you're trying to talk about. I guess it leads to better content because you've been able to spend just that little bit of extra on the bit you care about, as opposed to like, is this the most efficient, control statement for this thing? Or, am I importing this right using whatever language best practices? I don't know if it's there yet, but like, you can imagine a world at the speed these LLMs advance, a world that arrives very quickly, where you actually write your code sample in pseudocode. And then a bot, you just have a build pipeline that like spits it out in lots of different languages. Like that's going to be really powerful for developer advocates.
With so many new AI-based tools around, then presumably there must be some AI tools that are built especially for the needs of DevRel teams. And there are. In this interview, recorded in the summer of 2023, Contenda CEO Lilly Chen describes an earlier iteration of their offering.
Yeah, my name is Lilly Chen. I am the founder and CEO of Contenda. Contenda is a content catalyst platform for developer advocates. Specifically, it transforms videos into written tutorials with code samples and all those nice things. One of the big issues with the video transcript is that it's not meant to be read. So as a human, if you give me a transcript, it's very, very painful to read. It's not a good experience. So what we do is we take that and then all the information that was extracted on the video, and we ask GPT, hey, could you convert this into something that's more readable, into more of a blog post? And then we do some checks on our side to make sure that all of the content is accurate, it is correct, it matches the original author's intent and voice, and that's what we deliver.
If Contenda uses AI to help us generate content, what about the community side of DevRel? Here's co-founder and chief architect at Common Room, Tom Kleinpeter.
Yeah, Common Room uses AI in a number of different ways. We have kind of sprinkled it in all the places we thought that make a lot of sense. So we'll do things like just, kind of basic, starting with things like sentiment analysis, where you have content flowing into your community. It's nice to be able to tell what is positive, what is negative, and to keep metrics on those over time, and to kind of, it's just to be able to sort of see where things are trending in your community. That's kind of one of the more basic things we do with it. We also start to categorize messages that come into a community where you can tell just show me all the product appreciation we've seen recently, or show me all the bug reports, to where it's faster to go and filter the signal out of the noise. You have all this content flowing into a community. You have people and you have content, and LLMs that can understand language give us an opportunity to extrude all of this into repeatable shapes, where we can standardize things and then have metrics and reporting and sort of know, the sentiments trending over time. We've gotten more bug reports over time, or we released some new feature and bug reports went down. So the first big thing we get is just better, consistent, repeatable understanding of the content that's happening inside of a community. I think a second big thing we do with it is understanding the people in the community more. We use an AI-backed merging system where we can identify that different accounts in your community are actually the same people, which gives us just a better gives whoever's running the community just a better understanding of who is in their community. And if you want to correlate some happy comment on Twitter with some bug report that got fixed on GitHub, by being able to merge people together, we can do a better job of that. And merging is incredibly complicated. There are tons of signals and different ways you can look at this. And one of the things AI is really good at is just dealing with more information than humans can. And so we built our merge algorithm on top of that, and we're pretty happy with it.
So that's content and community. What about code?
I'm Martyn Woodward. I'm the VP of Developer Relations for GitHub. GitHub Copilot is an AI paired programmer, we call it. So it's a coding assistant that lives inside of your code editor and helps you do your coding with code completion, or you can also kind of ask it, do like chat functionality and things like that. As a DevRel person, you tend to be coding a bit, but you're not coding all the time. But you know how to code, programmatic thinking, but you might be having to use a lot of different languages or maybe a lot of different frameworks to then show somebody how to code from where they are into your thing. That's a lot of what our DevRel work is. And that's creating those code samples and things. That's actually what Copilot is awesome to help you with in terms of code assistance, but also, maybe your chat, say, hey, how do I do this in Python? I kind of know how to do it in Java, but how do I do this in Python? And then it'll give you an example, get you the framework, the skeleton, then you do the thing that you want to do, and it can assist you there. So really, it's what it says. GitHub Copilot is a co-pilot. It's not the thing that's driving. And so for somebody who knows how to code, then you can be incredibly productive with it, and it allows you to write a lot of stuff and do stuff. And so for DevRel, where we're flipping languages, that helps a bunch, really, I find.
While CodePilot will help you in writing code, what about creating integrations? Here's Martyn Davies from Superface.ai.
So at the high level, Superface abstracts APIs into the business cases that you need to achieve when you're building applications as a developer. And those abstractions are turned into what we call com links, short for communication links. These com links, they are structured representations of how an application needs to communicate with an API in order to achieve that particular use case, which might be send an SMS or sending an email, or get me this list of users, or add people to this list in a particular platform. Anything that you might need to achieve on a kind of everyday or repeatable basis. You thinking about it in that use case form, Superface kind of breaks that down, turns it into structured tools that you can then use and continue to use inside of your application. So we've got developer-specific tooling in the form of a CLI and an SDK that make creating and working with those com links actually possible. But ultimately, it's AI that's under the hood that's responsible for figuring out what that communication needs to look like, and it can do it simply by looking at the documentation for an API or an OpenAPI specification, and then it forms a plan that is represented as this com link that then gets turned into code that you can use directly in your application via the SDK. So the aim is to create like this unified developer experience for whoever's implementing these use cases and an interface that stays the same regardless of the provider you use. So if you've got multiple different email providers or multiple different communications providers, your interface through Superface would be exactly the same. So your inputs would be the same, your outputs would be the same, but you can swap out the providers just by generating new use cases, so it has an idea of how that API needs to be communicated with. The idea here is that it's less labor intensive to get up and running, and you get a much faster time to hello world, whilst presenting developers in the end with code that they can control, not a chatbot that spits out an amalgamation of code that somebody else wrote at some point. In terms of how Superface could help DevRel folks, I think we're offering another integration channel effectively. So, especially for those that API first DevRel folks, those, that love their OpenAPI specifications, Superface is a great tool to help demonstrate those APIs with a use case first mentality, which can really help, especially when you're thinking about documentation and example creation. Like Superface could very well sit alongside your Node.js SDK, your Ruby SDK, as a pathway for developers to consume what you do in their own applications. So it's, I think Superface is going to be a good tool for developer relations practitioners to employ and to deploy at some point.
And then there's the intersection of it all between code, content, community, and that is support. How do we offer better support, more timely support, more appropriate and relevant support to developers using our APIs and other tools through AI? Here's Deepak Kumar from Doc-E to talk about their tool.
We help companies grow their developer adoption. So I have a dream that one day developers will not have to wade through pages and pages of documentation to be able to understand an API. With Doc-E, we are taking one step closer to a world where I can get, as a developer, the precise, accurate information as and when I need it to build the software that I really want to build. And we leverage AI plus human control in a big way to deliver that to our developers. Doc-E can help you at 3 places. Number 1, at answering your community questions, which generally is outside of, like the group where your company is operating. So this helps you with the expansion of, addressing different concerns that people have. As we answer lots of questions, hundreds and thousands of them, at the end of the month, we generate a developer pain points report, which essentially is your advocacy to your R&D and product team as to where your developers are struggling. And third, we not only do advocacy, but we exactly help you create the content which helps the team in addressing those gaps. Because if people are asking questions, there is certainly something missing, right? A person would have gone on Google and other places, searched for at least 15 minutes. They could not get help. That's why they came to a DevRel person or a community. So we start with support, do the advocacy, and then help you with exactly filling the gap that we figured out in advocacy. Our model is to bring help where developers are, since developers are in Slack and Discord. So we bring you help where developers are as a bot for Slack and Discord.
So we've heard some of the good things about AI tools for DevRel, but what about some of the trickier aspects? If you've spoken to someone who does developer advocacy on behalf of an AI tool, you might have come across the idea that sometimes it can feel like you're working with a moving target. Here's Martyn Woodward from GitHub to share his experience.
Yeah, Git or Copilot could be a nightmare to do DevRel for, if I'm honest. And the number of times you sort of try and get it to redo the same thing and do it in the same way, and it doesn't, because these coding assistant tools are non-deterministic. They have a certain amount of randomness in them. And remember, they also are learning from what's around you and what options you're picking. And so sometimes it's quite hard to get it to do exactly the same thing. The reason why is really interesting, actually, because the way that these large language models work is they basically are predicting what's the next thing you're about to type, the next thing you're about to say. It's a bit like that meme on social media where you start typing something like, this podcast is awesome because, and then you hit the first word that the autocorrect gives you every time, and then you get an amusing sentence sometimes. But it turns out, actually, when we've been doing research with these LLMs, that actually the most interesting sentence or the best result isn't when you pick the most likely response every time. But if you pick a response that's, maybe occasionally you'll pick not the most, but maybe the second most or the third most likely response every time. And that's what they call that randomness, that entropy, that they call that temperature in a lot of these LLM models. So you set a temperature setting, and about 0.8 usually gives you a good setting for kind of the usual kind of, written prose type stuff. So that's why it's non-deterministic. But oh my goodness, when you're trying to create a video, you get Copilot and you're playing with it and you're sort of coming up with a good demo scenario. And then it just gives you an amazing response. Oh, that's fantastic. And so you're like, right, I'm going to record that. And so you rewind your demo, you try and do it again, and it either gives you a completely different response, or sometimes when you're doing DevRel for Copilot, you're trying to explain to people how it learns from you and, how to prompt it better. So you'll maybe get one response which is okay. You say, oh yeah, but how about I give it a better prompt? And so you give it a slightly better comment or something like that, and then it gives you exactly what you want. Next time you come to then give it kind of what you want, it'll often just shortcut straight to the answer you definitely wanted because, it's learning. And so that's some of the hardest things about doing a sort of Copilot with for DevRel. I want to create actually a faux pilot where it just kind of where it records real responses back from the service, and then I can repeat my keystrokes kind of thing, and it plays it back. I keep meaning to do that so I can kind of replay some of these, but otherwise it's good fun, and it certainly speeds you up, and you get a lot of those oh my goodness, I can't believe it just did that moments all the time. It's amazing.
Let's wrap up then with some thoughts on what you as a DevRel person might consider when it comes to AI tools, but also what the future for these AI tools holds, so you can start to plan over the next 12 to 24 months how you're going to incorporate them into your programs. One question that frequently comes up with really any new technology is, will it take my job? Here's Lilly Chen from Contenda with her take.
I would say that DevRel people should not be worried about the growth of AI and what it means for them. The value proposition for DevRel internally is that you bridge the gap between engineering products and then the user base. Writing tutorials is part of the way that you're communicating to the user base, but it's actually not the end job for you. There's lots of other things that DevRel people do that cannot be automated by an AI. I believe communication, OpenAI put out a report about what are the skills that are threatened by AI and what will become higher in demand. One of them is critical reading and communication.
Let's wrap up then by considering what these tools might mean for the next 12 months. And we'll leave the final word with Colm Doyle of Intercom.
DevRel people tend to be on the bleeding edge of things. They tend to like to adopt new things, right? But that sometimes it creates like a jadedness in us. You know what I mean? Oh, this is a flash in the pan. It'll go next. I think like the only advice I'd offer is like the LLM things are like not a flash in the pan. Like I've people I respect have been like, no, this is like on the order of the iPhone in terms of a technological shift. So I guess my advice would be to not treat it like a flash in the pan and ignore it, and give it the attention it deserves. Like do an audit of your docs, like point an LLM at your docs and see how they do. Just go into Copilot and GPT-4 and try to write something with your APIs right now and see how it responds. Because if it responds well, you're doing something good and you should double down on it. If it responds poorly, then you might be missing out on an opportunity.